We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Your secrets, if you really look at yourself, you would be speechless. What happened to being doctors and teachers? What happened to being your brother's keeper? Nowadays,
Mr.BandClap, and we in the building with the first 2019 episode of TV, and we about to go deep on this one, y'all. This is about to be a 3-parter, and the title of this series is going to be called Aaliyah and the Path of the Triple Goddess. Part 1, Initiation. So we're about to break down Lilith, what she represents, and we're going to be showcasing and we're going to be talking about Aaliyah's path to becoming Akasha. So we got a lot to talk about, y'all. So let's get the show on the road.
Boy, you know you make me float. Boy, you really give me high. Ooh, I feel like I'm on dope. 'Cause you serve me on a regular.
Alright, y'all, so we back. Welcome to the first podcast of this year, BandClap TV. Thank you everybody for returning, and also I would like to thank all of the people who supported me last year. I really appreciate it. I got over 400 subscribers now, where when I first started in 2018 doing this, I only had like 100 and something. So as you all can see, my fan base has grown tremendously, and I only have you all to thank for that, because this wasn't really something that I was planning on doing with this channel. It's just something that kind of happened, and the more I'm doing this, the more spiritual messages are being given to me to tell you all. And every time I get a spiritual message, I'm going to tell it, because as a messenger person, that's what I'm supposed to do. And I always get good things happening to me when I put these podcasts out and I tell these messages. Good things always happen to me, so I want to keep that positive energy going. Y'all mean? So out the gate, y'all, we about to go hard. I mean, last year we talked about the Orishas. This year, even more potent messages are coming to me to tell you all about. So I'm gonna really have to warn you all that a lot of the things said on this podcast may not sit well with some people, and I understand that. You know, I'm only speaking to a small group of people who went through different things in their life, and they understand that those things that they went through in their life was to prepare them for a higher purpose. If you're still battling with those things that you went through, then this message, it may uplift you and it may give you some insight, or this message may anger you if you're taking it in a way that is not intended to be taken. Also, before I really get into what I want to talk about, with this new year, I want to do some new things with my podcast. One of the things that I wanted to do is have special guests on my podcast, the same way I did last year when I did a podcast with Hood Mystic and we talked about the woman's imprint and all of that. So with this new wave of podcasts that I'm about to do this year, I want to reach out to other occultists, other people who are knowledgeable about African spirituality. If you do readings, or if you're into divination, or even if you're someone who has a lot of knowledge about these things but you haven't really put it into practice yet, I would still like to talk to you and interview you and have you on my podcast. If one of the subjects that I'll be talking about, if you can add a different type of insight to it, it's always welcome to have other people input on certain things, because I may have something that I want to say about a certain subject, and then I may bring somebody else on and they may have a totally different way of looking at it or a totally different interpretation. But at the end of the day, both of our analyzed interpretations all go to the same place, because at the end of the day, there's so many different ways and so many different avenues that you can go to interpret a lot of these spiritual systems and a lot of these deities and their stories and all of that. But with me being a student and a scientist, I like to cover many different systems and many different things. So I may be talking about the Orishas one year, and then the next year I may be talking about Egyptian gods and goddesses, and or the next week I may be talking about voodoo or Hindu religion. You know, I'm a very astute learner. I like learning new things, and I also like to be able to make real world correlations between the African spiritual systems. And you can only do that by studying many of them, and then you start to see how all of these systems represent the same thing. It's just interpreted in different ways. So all right, y'all, so let's get into it, because man, there's a lot to talk about. I mean, when I first came up with the idea to do this podcast, I was just gonna make a super long podcast, but I said nah, because the information is so heavy and it's so deep that I don't want to lose nobody. So that's why I want to go ahead and break this up into 3 parts. And this part may be the most difficult part for a lot of people. And with this age of Aquarius, full blood wolf moon stuff that's going on, a lot of awakenings is going on all around the planet. A lot of people are being spiritually awakened. A lot of people that's already spiritually awakened, their psychic abilities are starting to be heightened. So if you was the type of person that had very spiritual, vivid dreams, your dreams are about to be 100 times more vivid. And not only that, when you wake up, you're going to start to be able to interpret your own dreams. Say if you were the type of person to see spirits or something like that, with this new age that's coming in through this blood wolf moon, your powers are going to start to be even more heightened, to the point where you're really going to need to trust that the Most High and that your ancestors are protecting you. Because just like the movie Bird Box that came out last year, you're going to have so many people that are going to go crazy, because this is that time frame to where if you're not up on game, if you're not on this stuff, ignorance of the law is no excuse. So either you know about it, and when that time comes and your powers are heightened or whatever, you can handle it and you can truly see what's going on for what it is, or you can choose to have your blindfolds on and go through this world and go through this time, quote unquote, blindfolded, until you end up at a place where it seems like a safe haven because it looks all beautiful, and the only people that are there are people who are legally blind, you know, people who really can't see. But the way I looked at that movie was, that's a prison. The people who were quote unquote legally insane, they were the ones that were really free because they can go anywhere. They don't have to be in one place. And I can kind of correlate that into life now, where when you really wake up and open up your eyes and take that blindfold off of your third eye and see this crazy world for what it is, that's when you're truly free. So enough about that. Let's get into it. So the reason why I'm even talking about Aaliyah is because with this R. Kelly stuff that's going on, every time R. Kelly's name get brought up, for some reason Aaliyah always comes up. And every time Aaliyah's name comes up, every time that comes up, something bad in the world always happens. And whenever that bad thing happens, it gets people's mind off of R. Kelly, and it never fails. Even back in the 90s, even in the early 2000s, when the whole sex tape thing was still fresh on everybody's memory, a turn of events went on, including that next album that R. Kelly dropped, and it was like all is forgiven. But it seems like every single time R. Kelly's name is brought up, Aaliyah's name is brought up, and the same process goes all over again. So me being the spiritual person that I am, this time around, I decided to tap a little bit more into her energy, because I know now that Aaliyah isn't Aaliyah anymore. She's Akasha, because that was the energy that she embodied before she died. So I've already been working with Akasha for a while. I mean, I did my own Akashic record reading and all of that, so I know what Akasha's energy is about. So me getting into her energy, it felt so much like a channel, but I've never done nothing like that before. I mean, I don't call myself a psychic medium or someone who can channel spirits or talk to the dead or anything like that. So when I get these very vivid and very specific type of thoughts in my head, I have to use my discerning spirit to be able to decipher who and what this stuff is. So with all of this stuff going on with R. Kelly, I tried my best not to go into it that much. I tried my best not to look into it because I really felt like it was a distraction and all of that type of stuff. But Aaliyah's energy just started coming to me real heavy. But me being the skeptic that I can be sometimes, I asked to send me a sign, you know, let me know that this is who this is that I'm talking to, or that's giving me these thoughts or whatever. Because when spirit talks to you, it's through thoughts, it's through feelings, and it's through symbols, since spirit doesn't have a mouth or a human vessel that it talks through, kind of like EVP, but that's a whole nother thing. So I ended up getting this free trial for YouTube Premium, where you can watch movies and stuff like that on YouTube. So I was saying, give me a sign, give me a sign. And so something just was like, so go to the YouTube Premium movie section. So I went to the movie section, and y'all won't even believe what was that first movie on the first row of that movie section. Yep, you guessed it, The Queen of the Damned. So I'm like, okay, all right, what's up? What's up? What is it that you want to tell me? What's up? And something really wants me to tell this story. And I kind of fought against it a little bit because I'm like, man, I don't know how these people are going to take this. And I really tried to look online to see, have anyone else who quote unquote channeled Aaliyah, did anyone else say anything about this? And it seems like no one is about to tell this story the way I'm about to tell it. So I really don't know how this is going to come out, but here goes. Now, as you all know, and I think I've covered this on my podcast that I did about Erzuli Danto and Erzuli Fleda, when I said that everyone who comes to this earth, we all have some type of life purpose, or we always have some type of life path that we're supposed to reach, and it's a certain type of energy and there's a certain type of impact that you're supposed to leave on this earth. And if you don't do it the first time around, then you have to keep reincarnating until you get it right. And then once you get it right, then you can ascend, or you have the choice to stay on earth as a spirit guide or whatever that you choose to do once you complete that purpose. So we have certain spirits that are very, very divine, and these spirits have the essences of great gods and great goddesses within them, and their purpose on earth is to introduce or to reintroduce that energy back onto this plane. And Aaliyah was one of those beings, because what she told me was this isn't her first incarnation. I mean, she's been on this earth a few times, and she always left in the same type of way. Now, one day I may do something talking about the many incarnations that she's been in, but for right now, for the sake of this podcast, I'm just going to talk about who she was in her recent incarnation, which was Aaliyah Dana Halton, because her life path and the things that she went through can be a lesson to not only women, but a lot of us, because we all have a purpose and we all have a spiritual path that we must fulfill before we can ascend and go to whatever you call the divine source. Now, how can you find that path, you may ask? There's a lot of different ways that you can do it. With some of us, you don't have to look no further than your own name. Sometimes I believe that as spirits, before we enter our mother's womb, or before we enter the earth and we're still in our mother's stomach, we give the thoughts to our mom and dad, telling them what name we should be. And some of these name origins have very, very deep meanings. And sometimes when you look at a prominent person and then you look up the etymology, or you look up the ancient meaning of their name pretty much means exactly the reason why they became a celebrity, or why they became the type of person that they were. Just like, for example, let's break Aaliyah's name down, and I'm going to put these sources at the end of this video in the description so you can look it up yourself. But when you take the name Ali, A-L-I, that is spelled A-L-I. Now, Ali is an Arabic word. It's an Arabic derived word, and it means high, elevated, or champion, which makes sense to why Muhammad Ali, or Cassius Clay, would name himself Muhammad Ali, because Muhammad is a Islamic name that means praise or to praise, and Ali meaning the champion or elevated. When you put that word in English, it means praise the champion, or the champion who is praiseworthy. And what did Muhammad Ali used to call himself? The champion of the world. Now, in Aaliyah's case, her name is A-A-L-I, and when you look that particular spelling of the name up, it actually means exalted, lofty, sublime, and also it means the most high. And as we all know, Y-A-H, which means Yah, is the Hebrew word for God. Now, in the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, Yah can also mean to express disgust, contempt, or defiance. So remember that as well. So just with Aaliyah's first name alone, when you put it all together, it literally means most high goddess that is exalted and may express defiance or contempt. Now let's move on to her middle name, Dana. Now, when I researched the name Dana, Dana has a lot of different meanings. They say that it came from Denmark. That's one of the origins of that name. And some sources say that Dana is also an alternate spelling of a Celtic fertility goddess named Danu. In Persia, the name Dana means knowledgeable. In Arabic, the name Dana, spelled D-A-N-A-H or D-A-N-A, means the most perfectly sized, valuable, and beautiful pearl. And in Hebrew, Dana means God is my judge. So now, since we got the first name and the middle name, because your last name just represents your earthly family, where you came from. So when you take her first and middle name with the meanings intact and you put it together, it tells you a full sentence, which means a most high goddess who is exalted, but can also express defiance and contempt, because only God can judge her. Or you can also say that she is a most high goddess who should be exalted as the most perfectly sized, valuable, and beautiful pearl because of her generosity and great knowledge. I mean, it's a lot of ways that you can say this, but I just wanted to show you all how you can even take something as simple as your name to really figure out what your life path is. So Aaliyah had the life path of the triple goddess, which is 666. Now again, don't let that scare you, because again, when you really look at the 666 as far as a universal standpoint, 666 is the triple goddess, and it represents unconditional love, the most divine love that you could ever receive. It's only in an earthly form, when you talk about this human body, 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 6 electrons, that it's looked at as a bad thing or something like that. Because with this body that we're put in, we're spiritual beings, and we're put into this body to have a human experience, that it's looked at as something kind of evil, only because when you're in this body, you're very limited. As far as when you was just a spiritual being, you was able to be omnipotent. You had all of these special powers and things like that that you lose when you get into this body. You have to learn how to operate your spirituality with this body that you're in. So this podcast wasn't meant to be like a documentary about Aaliyah's life or anything like that. But in order to get this message across, I'm going to be going back to her life, and I'm going to have to be able to tell you some historical things about her, so that I can draw the spiritual parallel to this lesson that I'm trying to teach. So, as you all know, Aaliyah was born on January 16th, 1979. Now, in numerology, to find out what your life path is, all you have to do is just take all of the numbers in your birth date and add them together and simplify those numbers, and that's how you come up with your life path. So, an example with Aaliyah's birthday, if you add 1 plus 1 plus 6 plus 1 plus 9 plus 7 plus 9, that equals 34. And then when you add 3 plus 4 together, you get 7. Now 7 in itself is a very, very powerful spiritual number, because it's a number of godly completion in the human realm as well as the spiritual realm. And when you talk about the life path number 7, not only does it deal with you needing to be in a balanced combination of spiritual and material, the life path number 7 also means seeking knowledge, going deep into oneself and distancing yourself from the world to go deep within. There's a lot of holy things that deals with the number 7. We all know that in Genesis it talks about how God rested on the 7th day after he created the world and all of that. And it is also said that people that have the life path number 7 have very strong intuition and are able to receive information from higher levels of consciousness through dreams, channels, and other things like that. One thing that Aaliyah pointed out to me while I was doing my research was that Aaliyah was a very, very mature girl. Like, she was very, very mature at a young age, and also that she pretty much knew what she wanted to do and what she wanted to be at an early age. Now, just a little insight. When Aaliyah was 6 years old, she performed in this play called Annie. This is when she says that she realized that she really loved singing, like she really loved performing, and this was something that she knew that she wanted to do and that she wanted to keep doing. Now, she didn't get her first taste of the real limelight until she was 10. And when she was 10, that's when she performed on this show called Star Search, which was like a Apollo / American Idol type of show that used to come on back in the day. And when you look at that show, and when you look at Aaliyah's performance on that show, you can tell that whatever spirit that was inside of her, it was very, very powerful. It was way ahead of its time, and she had a very angelic type of voice at an early age, to the point where she caught the attention of her uncle's wife at the time, Gladys Knight, and she performed for 5 nights alongside Gladys Knight. Now, at this time, the world was kind of starting to see who Aaliyah was, but spirit-wise, she wasn't quite there yet. As far as her stage presence and just her overall spirit, it just wasn't quite there yet. Because, I mean, she's super young, just like Michael Jackson. When Michael Jackson was really, really young, he had to do grown folks things, like performing on stage, and he learned about the industry at an early age. And Michael Jackson was a damn good performer even as a kid. But Aaliyah, she had a higher purpose, and she had an even higher mission on Earth. There was a certain type of energy that Aaliyah had to bring to Earth. And for her to be able to bring that energy into the Earth, she first had to acquire a certain type of spirit. For an example, a person can be a king, maybe something happened to where maybe they was a prince and the dad died or something like that, and now he's a king. But if he doesn't go through the necessary things to change his spirit to the spirit of a king, if he still has the spirit and the ways of a prince when he's a king, no one is gonna listen to him. He's gonna be a shitty king. So Aaliyah had to go through a very, very quick metamorphosis at an early age. Just like how some of us, when we have that higher spiritual path that we have to go, sometimes we may get a small taste of what it is, but there's still going to be a time in your life where when you want to go in that total direction of your spiritual path, you have to have that spirit inside of you. And in order for you to metamorphosize into that spirit, certain things have to happen to you in order to quote unquote transform you, so that now you'll be able to meet the requirements to fit in the shoes of that person that you're supposed to be. And the word for that is called initiation. Now, when people think about initiation, especially when you're talking about African spiritual systems and religious practices, there's always an initiation process that you have to go through in order to call yourself a member of these societies or religions or whatever. Just like in Christianity, you have to be baptized. In some African spiritualities, you have to go through different rituals and lose different things, or get certain piercings, or walk through fire coals, or whatever religious practice or whatever practice that you're in. There's always going to be some type of initiation that you have to go through, and all that is transforming your spirit and your soul to be able to be fully equipped for the journey of your higher purpose that you're about to go into. So for Aaliyah's purpose, before she could embody the energy of Akasha in the Queen of the Damned, first she had to embody the energy of Lilith. And for this part one, that's going to be the farthest that I'm going to go talking about Aaliyah's life, because talking about Lilith, I can pretty much do a 3-part series alone just talking about who Lilith is. Because Lilith, she is a very, very dominant divine feminine goddess, and she is a cosmic goddess, because as we know, when you look into the mythology of Lilith, Lilith was the first woman to be on earth. Also, she was the first wife of Adam, and because of her rebelliousness, because she knew herself and she found out how powerful that she really was, and her sexual promiscuity and her sexual liberation, she was cast out by God. So that's why in astrology, Lilith represents that dark side of the moon, that dark side between the moon and earth. And to go even further, Lilith really represents that true divine feminine. Now, just a little bit on Lilith from my personal dealings with her. Lilith definitely is the cosmic queen mother. She represents that unconditional love, but she can be very hard when it comes to the lessons that she gives. But since she's a mother, her hard lessons are going to always be out of love. So I call Lilith the whooping mother, because she can give you a real good ass whooping, but then she can heal you afterwards and teach you the lesson of why she had to do all that. Because at the end of the day, Lilith is outside of morality. She is outside of social right and wrong. Lilith deals totally with universal balance. And sometimes when we're on this earth, we're so fixed on morality because that's what we're programmed to do. And you have these beings like Eshu and Lilith and Lucifer who come to you with these very, very unmoral, unconventional type of ways to solve your problems or stuff like that. And because of the way you were programmed to think and believe, and because of your morality, you look at these things as evil. But in a universal sense, there is no such thing as good and evil. It's just all about how you perceive it. And astrology wise, Lilith is a very, very important sign when you talk about astrology. It talks about those deep, dark sexual desires, and it also can talk about what can make or break you as a person. Now, when we look into Lilith, when it comes to relationships, and I can personally speak about this because I've had this happen in my life with 2 of my exes, Lilith can bring together 2 people that are total opposites from each other, but their Lilith sign is compatible, or she can take 2 people who would in other instances would be soulmates, and if their Lilith is incompatible with each other, it's not going to work. The relationship just isn't going to work. Now, an example of this I can say in my life, where my most recent ex, we were soulmates on paper, but my Lilith is in Capricorn, which means that I'll never stop trying, even if it's to my detriment. If I see something like a goal or something like that, I'm going to always try my best to reach that goal, even if it's to my detriment. And my ex's Lilith was in Gemini. So that means when it comes to being sexual and when it comes to those deepest, darkest desires, she's going to forever be curious and she'll never be satisfied. And when I was with her, that's what was playing out. So that's why I say one of the most toxic relationships that you can be in is a woman who's never satisfied and a man who won't stop trying. Now, I also got another example of this because I had another ex, and on paper, there was no way that we were supposed to be together at all. I mean, we were so opposite in pretty much every single way. But upon further research, I found out that her Lilith was in Aquarius, meaning that when it came to being with someone, whether it was sexually or something like that, what she finds attractive are people who are extraordinary, people who aren't like everybody else. So that's what brought us together, because as long as I stay myself and as long as I stay unique and original, she's always gonna like me. Now, in Aaliyah's case, for her to be able to live up to her life path as the Most High goddess who's rebellious, defiant, but well adored and well loved, she had to go through a very special, I would say, very peculiar initiation process. And how she explained it was for a certain chosen people who are supposed to have very specific godly life paths. If you are born into a body, if you're born into a body that has a certain set of personalities that's not going to be compatible with the life path that you're supposed to be on, your initiation process to get your spirit into that whatever spirit that it's supposed to be in to complete your life path, your initiation process may be a lot harder or a lot more drastic than the next person. But the key is not to look at it as something bad was happening. You have to look at it as this bad thing that I went through, it had to happen in order for me to be the god or the goddess that I am today. And since Aaliyah had to, in a lot of ways, embody the spirit of Lilith in order to transform later into Akasha, she had to go through some very, very drastic initiation processes for that spirit to be able to live in her. And her initiation process started when she was 12 years old, and she was introduced to another person that her uncle just signed to his label, Jive Records, and that person was R. Kelly. Now, this is the part of the podcast that I gotta say this again. I'm talking about something that's very, very spiritual. This is on a higher type of level, and since we're dealing with Lilith, you have to take your morals out of this, and you have to take your human values out of this, because we all know that our greatest people that lived on this earth, they all had to go through some very, very hard, very, very drastic, very, very painful sometimes initiation processes. And on a spiritual level, initiation just simply means sometimes in your life, a turn of events has to go down in order to get your spirit ready for the path that you're about to go on, the higher life path that you have to go on. And the key is to not let that initiation experience drive you into the crazy house, because you need to go through that in order for you to be able to transform and go to that life path. And when it comes to this, I can recall what I would consider my initiation into manhood, into true manhood, because when you think about us as men and women, we all have to go through that stage where we're rebellious and we're looking for that freedom and things like that. We've been a child and we've had our parents under us and stuff like that so long, and once we finally get to that point where we think that we're grown and we think that we can go out and go out into the world, we have these turn of events that goes down that'll either humble you and show you that you're not really ready yet to be out in the world, or these things will transform you into that man or into that woman. Just like how Michael Jackson as a boy had to be a man at an early age, Aaliyah as a girl had to be a woman at an early age, unfortunately. But for me anyway, I was always a very rebellious kid. I wasn't doing nothing like wrong or anything like that, but I just always loved my freedom, and I could never really get that being at home with my mom and dad. So I got my small taste of freedom when I left and went to MTSU when I graduated from high school, and I was not out on my own. I had roommates and stuff like that, but when it comes to in general, I was out on my own. My mom and dad wasn't around. I didn't have to go home at night. I didn't have to worry about those type of situations. So at this time, I really felt like I was quote unquote grown, because I was finally out of my mom and dad house and all of that. But one thing that I learned the hard way is that with great freedom comes an even greater cost to keep it. And with me going straight from a community college to a university, it was a giant leap, especially going from Southwest Community College to MTSU. Because if anybody knows how Southwest Community College in Memphis was ran, at least in the 2010s, you would know that that school is pretty much ran just like a high school. So you thinking you're going to be able to get away with things and do certain stuff that you was able to do in the community college, thinking that you're going to get away with that in the university, it was a rude awakening for me. And needless to say, I failed miserably. I failed when it came to my classes, because I tried to pull those same stunts that I would pull at Southwest, and I would actually get away with it. But those teachers at MTSU, they weren't playing that. So I failed when it came to that. I failed when it came to managing my money. because when you get that financial aid check, you know, for some people, that's a lot of money that you have just at your disposal. I mean, I wasn't used to having no $2,000 and no $1,000 in my hand at one time. So I did very poorly when it came to managing my money, which as a result, I pretty much ended up, after a year and a half of going to MTSU, I ended up coming back home with my tail between my legs because I just wasn't ready to be out on my own yet like I thought I was. But the thing about this path that we're on is that after you get that hard lesson, it's not over, because after your wounds have been healed, you're still going to have to complete that initiation. Even if things didn't go right the first time, you still got to go through it again until you get it right, if you're really serious about being on this life path, on this journey. So during 2012, I went back home, collected myself, got myself back together, started working, started DJing at the local club that was next door to me. And through that, I ended up in Atlanta in 2013. And that was the real initiation. And when I tell you, I had to start all the way from the bottom of the mud. People say they got it out the mud. Well, I had to go to the bottom of the mud, because there was a lot of lessons in humility and compassion that I had to learn. And these were things that me being at home in Memphis wasn't going to teach me. I had to go out and go through this in order for me to be the well-rounded and balanced person that I am today. And I went from being homeless, going from shelter to shelter, to staying with roommates that I did and didn't get along with. But it all paid off in the end, because the Ricky in 2014, when I ended up getting with my recent ex, wasn't the same Ricky that left the house in 2012 and 2013. I mean, looking back over that, I did go through a major metamorphosis. And looking back on it, I wouldn't change, no matter how crazy this may sound, but I wouldn't change any of the stuff that I went through back then. Because if I didn't go through a lot of stuff that I went through, I wouldn't be as compassionate to homeless people and having such a big heart the way I am if I too wasn't homeless. Now, one thing I learned in my journey is that a smart man learns from his own mistakes, but a wise man learns from the mistake of others. So some things like jail and other things I don't want to experience. And I'm glad to say that I've had people around me who I was able to kind of live vicariously through, and they will go out and do those things that I was curious about, but I knew that it was wrong, and they ended up getting in trouble, and I would learn from their lessons to not go the path that they went on and do it. So going back to this talk about initiation, because with Aaliyah's story, after she completed her initiation, which was around 15 to 18, that was around the time that she completed her initiation, she received her first six, because you know the triple goddess deals with the 3 6s. So this podcast is talking about how Aaliyah received her first six, which was Lilith. Lilith was the first spirit that Aaliyah had to align herself with in order for her to later on in life go on to play Akasha in Queen of the Damned, and also to embody her energy on until death and even now. But I'll go more into Akasha on part 2 of this podcast if y'all want me to, because this stuff that I'm talking about now, this isn't just about Aaliyah. This pretty much is about any woman that wants to fully go through their process of womanhood, because in a way, all women have to acquire those 3 6s before they die, with being a wife / motherhood being that last 6. And this is something that is not really being talked about in our society today. And that's why you have all of these teen pregnancies, and you have a lot of Oyas running around, and not enough Obananis, and not enough humble Oshuns. Because all I'm talking about when I'm talking about the path of the triple goddess and the 3 6s, the first 6 represents that rebellion and promiscuity, which all women go through when they're super young. A lot of us don't want to talk about this because, you know, this is kind of one of those things that known but not said. But this is 2019, and we're getting further and further into the age of Aquarius. So these things, we really need to start talking about it, because this next generation that's about to come is really going to be our only hope if we're really trying to be serious about taking back over this planet. And they don't need to be out here rogue. Like, they really need to know the type of power that they possess, especially with our women. So like I said, the first 6 is that rebellious, Lilith, sexual liberation, that stage, but it's still kind of in a young and dumb stage because of this body that we're living in. And then the second 6, or the second transformation, is when the woman got some experience under her belt sexually, but now she's getting to that point to where she's kind of starting to find herself. You know, she's slowly yearning to be that mother, yearning to be that Obanani, that wife, that great mother Yemoya, which is the last 6. But right now, in the second 6, she's just more like a Mami Wata or a serpent goddess, meaning that she's still out in the world being promiscuous, but she's a lot more experienced. She's a lot more cautious now, and she's a lot more getting ready to be more aligned to that spiritual path, that higher path, which she can only get to once she fully gets past stage 1 and stage 2. Now, ideally for us men, the greatest woman that we can even think about wifing up would be a woman that's completed at least the first 2 sixes without having children while doing it. So when she finds that husband and she gets married and she becomes that great mother, that Obanani, that husband that she chooses to be her king is gonna be able to enjoy giving her her greatest gift of all, which is gonna be her first child. So, all right, y'all. I know this was a super long first podcast, but I really had to get this out because I'm starting to see people in all walks of life when it comes to this spirituality talk about this in different ways. So the main thing that I want people to get from this podcast is, first and foremost, from what I received in my channel about Aaliyah, everything that went on with her and R. Kelly needed to happen in order for her to become the goddess, the queen goddess that she is right now. And number 2, no matter who you are, no matter what your personality is, no matter what your personal goals or aspirations or anything is, once you decide that you want to start walking in your true purpose, in your true life path, just you coming to terms with that, you've already started your first step into your initiation process. You don't really have to go through a religious system or any type of unorthodox man-made initiation procedure. Because if you truly have a godlike or goddess-like path on this earth, you don't have to worry because life is going to give you your initiation. And for those people who are indecisive about that, if you can look back over your life and you're successful now, but you remember how hard your life was back in the day before you received your success, that stuff that you went through to get you where you are today, that was your initiation. But don't get it twisted, because if you get that success or you get to where you're trying to go or you get on that path and then you start fucking up, regressing and backsliding, then you may end up going through another initiation process because maybe the first one didn't stick to you the way it was supposed to because you're still acting up. So the key is to stay positive, stay with a humble heart and a loving spirit, and take everything as a lesson. I mean, everything as a lesson. From the number synchronicities that you're seeing on your clock, all the way to you talking to somebody about something that you felt in your spirit, and then you see something out in your environment that reminds you of that, because you never know. Maybe that spirit trying to tell you something. All right, y'all. So that's my podcast. Next podcast is going to be talking about how Aaliyah became Akasha, and I'm going to break down some things about Akasha that I received from channels as well. And if y'all like these type of podcasts, because I usually don't disclose a lot of these type of informations, y'all let me know. Like and share my videos, subscribe to my channels, and if you want to donate to my channel so I can pay for these artists and pay for these guests to come onto my show, as well as to get more equipment so I can make my podcast even better, I accept Cash App, and I'll put that information below too. It's Mr. BCN, so it's the $ and Mr. B as in boy, C as in cat, N as in Nancy. So all right, y'all, thank y'all for listening, and I'm out.